how are you? Well, I made a couple of frames yesterday, and this is the kind of project where I just make a bunch of them and it becomes almost like an assembly line. So first I made all the frames, and I sanded all the frames, and I stained all the frames, and then this morning I sprayed all the frames with lacquer. I like to let the stain sit on the wood for at least 12 hours before I put lacquer over it. And so now I'm going to fill all of the little nail holes, and I generally make my wood filler for this because it's hard to find wood fill of the right color. It's usually too light and very noticeable. So what I'm going to start with is Ready Patch, and I'm using Ready Patch because this is oil based, and I'm going to tint it with oil paints, artist oil paints. I've got a little dab of the Ready Patch. This is just a piece of masonite with some primer on it, and now I'll use a little burnt umber, and I'll put a little black. I'm not sure if I'll use this, but I might want some. And just a tiny bit of red. And I'll pull the Ready Patch over into this corner and mix right in the center here. It's a little too light, so I will add just a bit of the black, and I'll add a small amount of the red. Just a little more red and more of the brown. I'm using the palette knife for my tool to fill the holes. I just put a little dab in the hole and then wipe it off. I always go darker when I'm using wood fill, and the reason for that is if you think of a board and you think of an imperfection in a board, it's generally darker. So if you look at a board and you see a knot, the knot is going to be darker than the rest of the board. If there's a sap line in the board, it's generally going to be darker. And so by putting darker wood fill in the little nail holes, they appear to be maybe a deep part of the grain. If the fill was light, I think your eye would go right to it. Now this works great for these little nail holes. I wouldn't use this wood fill for a major repair or a major crack in a board. Generally, when I'm working on major repair jobs or cracks, I use sawdust and epoxy. I also wanted to point out that I'm using this wood fill on finished wood, meaning the wood is sealed and it won't be stained by the wood fill. This works great if you're filling holes for maybe a bookcase. If you've made a built-in and you've nailed the face frame on, you can go back and match up the wood fill pretty close with the oil paint and the Ready Patch. And then just make sure you wipe off the excess. There is going to be a little depression because you're not actually sanding it flush like you would be if you were sanding the fill off. So there's a slight depression, but it's really not very noticeable. I made these frames for these small paintings that I make, and this is my painting box. This is what I travel with, and Jay Bates made a version of this box if you want to check that video out. And I might take another swing at the design of this box. I showed this box about 6 months ago, and that's when Jay made the video, and since then I thought there might be a couple of changes, so maybe that's a project for sometime next year. But the fun thing about this box is a lot of these paintings I haven't seen in a few months, and now I'm going to take them out and put them in a frame. And one more thing I wanted to point out, and you may have noticed, I've got an old piece of plywood on my work table, and I do that whenever I'm staining a project because that way, once I finish the project, I can put the piece of plywood in storage and I don't have that mess in my workshop any longer. It's not on my everyday work surface. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you soon.